Well, welcome everybody to 2023. Happy New Year, and welcome to the first edition of the SLA CIC Learning Series. And we want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to be a part of this outstanding community and prioritize learning something new. My name is Liz Frickleton, the Roar WDC, and we've been a longtime sponsor and supporter of the SLA CIC. If you're new here, extra special welcome. This webinar is just a part of what we offer and what the CI community produces. We also, beyond this ongoing webinar program, we've of course helped to promote and coordinate all of the presentations at our annual conferences. The one last year in 2022 was in Charlotte, and we'll be looking ahead to one in May this year in Detroit. So I see a lot of you here were either former speakers or attendees, so it's so great to see everybody. Before we get to this awesome discussion today, I want to cover a few things for us. So let's jump right in. So today, as you know, we have the pleasure of hearing from Jonathan Calof, Ellen Naylor, and Jim Miller are with us to talk all things event intelligence. Before, like I said, we get to that, I do want to talk to you a little bit about the CIC mentorship program because we're really passionate. And our philosophy is to leverage those passions and talents of the CIC to others in the broader community. And so there's quite the range of constituents you can see there, from students to existing CI members to fellows to SCIP members. So it's very, very cross-functional across our community. And we just feel like there's so much value, right, in broadening the scope and combining forces with our like-minded peers. So there are, as Phil likes to say, so Phil Britton is sort of spearheading this, that there are more mentors than mentees. So please, if you're interested at all, get involved. You can contact Phil. His information is there on the screen, but spread the word. And if you're interested, don't hesitate. Get in touch. We are also looking for a couple leadership positions. As a CIC, we need you to help to make this continue, to keep pushing forward as a profession. And what an awesome way to give. You know, they say it's better to give than receive. And I found a lot of rewarding opportunities being here as your content chair. And I think that there's, if there's those out there that are interested at all, we are looking or recruiting for a chair and a chair-elect for 2023. And so if that is something that interests you, doing more than just attending a webinar, but sort of giving back or strengthening your leadership skills in that way, driving the community forward, this is an awesome opportunity. So I encourage you to get involved. Kate Vilches is the current chair, so she'll be looking for someone to step in. So I've got her information there. She'll be the person to contact for that. I hope you consider it. The next couple things are dates. So what do we got logistically coming up? So the conference, like I said, is unique because we're partnering with the Medical Library Association, the MLA. So SLA and MLA are pairing up, and they're meeting May. We are meeting the 16th through the 19th in Detroit. And so this is our opportunity, again, to share thought leadership, our knowledge, our experience, our perspectives with the community. And so I just checked the site, and they're still open for posters and lightning talks. So we may have missed the window there on actual speaking proposals, but know that that is available through at least January 26th is what they're saying now. So I will, and our team will put the link in the chat in case you're interested in looking at that submission site. We're going to have more webinars coming up this year, so please stay tuned to our social media channels and the ways that you stay in touch with us, whether it's the newsletter or the SLA Connect, and we'll get those out to you as they are set up. And then we're going to talk about Jonathan's book today, but I couldn't let this pass without sharing about the Practical Guide to Competitive Intelligence that came out late last year. And we were long anticipating this book to actually be in print. And our chief collaborators are Zena, Elise, and Phil, of course, who have recruited this outstanding list of contributors to the book. And it's all of the practical wisdom, the things that we need to do to succeed in our jobs and not get fired. And so I think if you're in CI, or even if you're not, I think this book will be helpful in just helping you become more effective and making a greater impact. So I highly recommend. And there's going to be also a link if you want to check out where you can get it, which is Amazon, or if you're an SLA member, you do get a discount. So we'll put both those in there, and that way you can be eligible for that. So, okay, I'm almost there. We will be selecting one random person to get a little money, a little cash for coming today as a thank you. One of our attendees, just in terms of testimonials, what they've said about just the value of this program and just the platform for learning. And if you are interested and you're on Twitter, I don't know if I put the CIC hashtag CIC webinar is an awesome little add to your tweet if you want to keep the conversation going offline too. So, okay, thanks guys for your patience as we're getting ramped up. Jim is I'm going to hand off to him, and I'm so excited to jump into this conversation. And thank you all for being here to share your perspectives with us and talk about the book too. So Jim, I'm going to hand it over to you to get us going.
Excellent. Thanks, Liz. Thank you very much. As always, you're doing an excellent job with the content share for SLACIC. And while we're talking about books, I think this is a great segue, in the sense that this book here by Jonathan Calof is a great sort of piece that is very specific about event intelligence. So unlike the other SLA books, so you should actually get both. And we'll show you here how you can get your own copy of this Gaining Market Insights book as well. And I'll put that in later in the chat. But first I want to introduce our panelists for today. The first panelist is Ellen Naylor, who is, I'm sure, known to most of you here, longtime member of our involvement with SLA, and she's one of the pioneers in competitive intelligence. She started the Business Intelligence Source in 1993 after having started Verizon CI in 1985, which, you know, to me is a long time ago. Sorry, that's it's just no offense, Ellen, but it's just astounding that we have had such great progress in CI, and it's been around.
I'm not dead yet.
No, I know it's not yet, but it's a matter of it's astounding that we have wonderful people like you that have actually contributed so much for so long, which is excellent. And she's also written a book, Win-Loss Analysis. So she's one of the analysis, which is how to capture and keep the business you want, which was published in 2016. And as well as she's been a longtime member of SCIP and has written books for them as well, contributed to their Competitive Intelligence magazine. So thank you, Ellen. I know you have loads to contribute here today, so thank you. Next is Jonathan Calof, the author of the book, and he is here in Ottawa, Canada, as well as myself, and is a professor of international business and strategy at the Telfer School of Management at the University of Ottawa. And most recently, Jonathan has been appointed a UNESCO co-chair in anticipatory systems for innovation and venture creation, which is quite an honor for Jonathan, as well as I think for Canada. Sorry, I think it's great that we have this and anticipatory systems, strategic foresight, something that certainly is very collaborative with CI. So we're definitely glad to have Jonathan with us, and he has written several pieces, well, too many to count, with around event intelligence, competitive intelligence in general, as well as anticipatory systems and just general strategy. You know, one of his best is a piece that he did looking at the unfortunate demise of Nortel, which was one of the world's leading telecom companies. And unfortunately, you know, is no longer with us, but Jonathan's insightful piece on that was, I think, sort of foundational to sort of business and reading and strategy. And Jonathan as well is been a longtime member of SCIP and a longtime practitioner of event intelligence, having started sort of when he was 12, and I think that would be great because I've heard lots of stories on that as well. So anyhow, so just to get started, as I said, this book is a compendium of articles and pieces that Jonathan has written for Competitive Intelligence magazine over the years on event intelligence. And that's not just trade show intelligence, it's events of all kinds. And I think that that's important to recognize when we're looking at this book, that it's gaining the market insights from all sorts of events that we are able to go to, whether it be a trade show, whether it be a learning conference opportunity, whether it be a Christmas holiday party, Hanukkah party, whether it be a sporting event. I mean, that's a lot of ways to get market intelligence in some way, depending on what field you're in, who's there. So I think that this book is a phenomenal book that covers a lot of ground in a narrow topic, but it's like every page of it is learning something new, which is impressive. Not necessarily new for me, because I don't do a lot of event intelligence, but I think that this is a really great book. And so I'm going to start it off. I'm going to ask Ellen to start us off today, and just to tell us a bit about what you thought of the book and what you thought was sort of the highlights, and the sort of best point takeaways for you.
Boy, where do I begin, huh, Jonathan? Jonathan and I have known each other about 30 years, just to put things in perspective. Not quite, but pretty close. Anyway, this book is going to give you from A to Z about event intelligence, collection, dissemination, what to do with it, how to prepare for it. And really, I think a really big takeaway from this book is preparation. You can't prepare enough, and Jonathan goes into all the different ways you can do that, because when you get to a trade show or whatever the event is you are attending, things sometimes don't go kind of as planned. So you have to be prepared for that. So the more you can think about how it'll be and who you want to target to see and why, the better. The other thing I always like to mention is Kent Potter, one of the quotes that Jonathan has in his book, and an old friend, taught me that interviewing is about developing relationship. And Jonathan goes into relationship in so many different ways in this book, including my favorite, which is the friendlies, which we'll get into later on. It's very Jonathan. Even the usage of the word friendlies is so Jonathan. I just love it. He also includes a lot of cultural sort of innuendos that you should be aware of. And because not all trade shows bring in, well, there's geographic difference, but there's also who is there, how they are. Do you have the right person talking to the right person? Sometimes it doesn't work out for you to be talking to that person because you're not in that space. I don't do R&D. I'm going to hire someone to do the R&D, discussion with somebody else in R&D, because they'll laugh at me and say, yeah, right. Okay, lady. Also, just the whole point of how there is a great big ROI in trade show event collection, but I'm going to say trade show because trade show is often where the money is, right? So, if you can collect, and I think this was a Vernon Pryor, but many of us also say this, you can collect in 2 or 3 days at a trade show what it might take you a year to do using other means. And today, maybe that's a little less true because there are so many other means of collecting. However, what I really like about the trade show, especially if they're in person, and I know we have virtual, we're going to talk about that, right, Jonathan? But the trade shows in person, I find that immediate dialogue is so worthwhile. And it's back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And they are there to sell. They are there to share. They are your little friends. A lot of people are frightened to go to trade shows and talk to the people at the booths or ask questions after a conference or go have coffee or go have dinner or go to the social events. Trade shows are fun. Don't take yourself so seriously. And I'm going to stop here because I think Jonathan, I see his little smile on his face. I just have a feeling he has just a few points to make.
Well, that's a very good handover, Ellen. I think it's great because I think one of the things I always looked at is, and I know that Jonathan has written significantly on event intelligence, but my big question was around this book that you've put out, and why you wrote the book in the first place, and what you're hoping that the book will do. As I mentioned earlier, and Ellen just mentioned as well, the trade show is the big part of it, but it's also now with the expanding world and getting into virtual trade shows as well. That's also a big piece. So I guess my big key question is sort of why you wrote the book now, and what you hope to achieve with this.
Well, Jim, and for those that are watching this, I've known Jim for 25 years and Ellen for 30 years. So this is actually three friends gathered around the campfire, telling stories and chatting, and you're going to see that in the relationships. So, why I wrote it, I said, and I'm glad you asked that before we got into more of the content. There are two broad items I'm going to bring up here. One is who the book was written for. And I think that's absolutely critical. And the second one was the core philosophies behind the book. And so I'm going to start off with what Ellen said. Ellen said that in 3 days, you can gather more than you could any other way. And we know it's a huge opportunity. CI professionals have been written about it for years. Most CI practices have a CI specialization within their consulting organization. But what we don't always talk about is that it's also very important for companies. Research has shown that 97% of people go to trade shows to learn. A bunch of them are going to buy something afterwards, but they're there to learn. And so you look at it and you go, all right, enough is enough, to quote my Jewish expression, Dayenu. That's enough. Too many companies have blown the opportunity. And I managed trade show booths. I've staffed them. I've organized presence. I can tell you lots of stories about it. So it was a Dayenu. It's about time we wrote a book that would help, one, obviously the CI professionals. How do you do it better? What's the skill set? They're not all perfect at it, and they really want to get better. Number two, anybody who goes to a trade show, anybody, or a conference or a workshop, if you're there to learn, well, are you organized for learning? CI's got stuff that you can give to them. And in fact, Jim's going to talk about how the book is available for free, which means you can break off pieces of the book and send it to people, and I'm not really going to care. The third group, and this is actually very important, I call event intelligence all hands on deck, meaning even if you're not part of the event intelligence team, you can provide enormous support. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One of the shows I was at, sales and marketing are trying to land customers. And so they're doing some research and some questions at the show. And then they're sending a list off to HQ where the information staff are doing background checks on the company, credit ratings, so that the team is better prepared the next day. I have seen R&D teams, so scientists, research staff, helping develop intelligence plans. Why? Because if it's an S&T R&D innovation-based topic, they actually know who's who. They know an engineer is not an engineer is not an engineer. They know who is the right person to talk to, how to approach them, the language to be used. And there's a lot in the book about how everybody needs to get involved in this, and the help you can provide back home, even in terms of going over the trade show materials, what's happening, and saying to the CI team or the people going, yeah, that's the individual you need to talk to. And I'll tell you great stories about that if we have time later on. So the book was written for anybody because we all go to events and we blow the opportunity. And I'll tell stories afterwards. The philosophy, though, I think is what's really important. And it's about, number one, it's about focus. You got 3 days. And once those 3 days are up, you're done. You can't go into a time machine and go backwards and say, if only I would have asked. You can do that on the telephone. You can call back and say, I'm now going to ask you another question until they get sick of you. I gave a similar presentation to a group of infrastructure providers in Mexico. I said, focus, focus, focus. What do you need to know? What will be at that event? They look so sad. And I don't normally have people looking sad at my seminars. You know me, I joke around. Ellen says I'm friendly. So I said, why are you so sad? They said, we thinking about what you're saying. The perfect show for us is the Las Vegas infrastructure show. And I said, great, then you should be smiling. They said, no, it was last week. I said, great, then you'll be ready for next year. They said, no, it's every 2 years. So some of these events, when you blow it, you really, really blow it. So focus. Number 2, and Ellen, you said it when you talked about the friendlies. It's about knowledge management. It's about network management and mapping. It's about what information do we already have in our network that we don't have to ask that question at that event, given the temporal orientation and the short time frame. What do we got? Who are the friendlies? Who are the level 1s, the level 2, and the LinkedIn profiles, so that we can task the right person with asking the question? So we can have them send a message and say, this really is a buddy of mine. And I can tell you great stories about that one as well. Knowledge management, networking. As I said, number 3, in terms of philosophy, it is all hands on deck. I want people who are on this webinar and anybody who reads the book to realize everybody in the organizations, their job is to make the organization more effective. I don't care what you do, you're involved. And you should be looking at events and going, how can I contribute to the plan? How can I contribute to preparation? How can I contribute at the event? And Ellen, you mentioned virtual events. Wow, how can I contribute to virtual events by being on the system, since it's not costing my company any money, and answering questions relevant to my area? And finally, number 4, and Ellen, you're going to talk more about that, and Jim, so will you. Big philosophy in event intelligence. We're setting a high ethical bar, a high ethical bar. We're saying do not misrepresent. That's a skip guideline. We're saying don't bury your name tag somewhere where no one's going to see it. Be honest with who you are and why you're there. And because events are where people want to talk, it's not called trade protect, it's called trade show. Because there's so many people you can talk to, because innovation is all over the place, you can do this. And for some of the SLA members that are on this, I've had a great time with this in shows that you would consider to be sensitive. R&D based technology shows, defense shows. I've had so much fun at defense shows, being myself, being honest, being open, introducing people, and finding the lessons of the book. So the last philosophy is, this is not hard. It really is not hard. It's, in fact, you'll read the book and say there's a lot of common sense, but it's so doable by anybody. Jim, does that give you a little bit more as to why I wrote it, the core philosophy?
Yeah, no, that is the core piece. I mean, I think there's, as I said before, every page there's something that you're going to get out of it, with the different tips on how to, whether it be the planning. And I just wanted to start with that, actually, because I think that's the key piece. And I think for a lot of the people in this audience, and that's SLA, I think the sort of secondary, both the secondary and the primary research of putting together profiles for people, that you know what information we already have, what information is it that we need to get, who do we need to see, and then help build those up that says, this is a person here, here's something you could talk to them about, and even that sort of idea that you put together a profile that, and this actually goes to Jonathan's and piece about friendlies too, right? It's actually how you approach those people, how you identify them, and how you something about them. That it is actually going to help you to sort of break the ice to get in and to do that. And I know that some people are really hesitant on trade shows, and I've been to enough SLA conferences. The library, you can tell the librarians who are very quiet and didn't want to talk to anybody, and they don't want to actually deal with booths, and they're just there for free pens. But at the same point in time, I mean, I've gone to a number of those where I'll ask a zillion questions, and again, the ethics piece of it, it's not misrepresenting yourself as to who you are. I do this is what I'm looking into, can you help me out? And they're willing to help you. Coming from my politics background, I always looked at things from, I'm not going to give away stuff that I don't want to see on the front page of the national newspaper, right? So if the person running the booth has that bent in mind, I mean, it's not like you're asking them for trade secrets, and they're not going to give, hopefully they're not going to give them to you. But at the same point in time, I think that ethics is such a key part of this, in the sense that it's your guiding star that says, why am I here? What am I trying to do? And who am I? Who what values am I representing here for both yourself and for the company that you represent? And I think that's key. So the planning piece I found, even with some very helpful tables and checklists that are in this book. My favorite still has to be the one that says "Better luck next time," and how to plan for an event. Sort of how to plan properly. So as you said, it's you've got 3 days at the trade show, but it's not just 3 days. It's as you pointed out, when is the trade show? Who do we want to see? What type of information are we going to get? And I think that a lot of people in the special libraries community would be greatly able to contribute to that, and really have to step up and say, hey, I can provide you with this. So, and also bringing together, it's a team effort, right? So if it's marketing, it's legal, it's research and development, making sure that everything is covered off so that we don't miss this opportunity, but that the planning is going to get you to making sure that you're not missing things, and you're getting full advantage over the event that may only be happening for 2 or 3 days. But with that in mind, Ellen, do you want to just go over sort of some of your stories with regard to because I know you've done significant amount of work in this area, and some of the things that you've learned, and what you sense that are key points that are mentioned in this book that you said, yeah, definitely that's something that's key to the way event intelligence should be conducted.
Yeah, I'll start out with ethics, and that it's a conversation, but I'll start out with ethics first, because it is so important. I've had people ask me to, wear a name tag for a big company that I'm not working for, right? I'm like, no, we don't do that. I just say who I am. And, it's not only unethical, it is unnecessary. I know that Rich Caldwell tells me in the defense world, he wears where he's from. And at the time, he was from Northrop Grumman. He could go to any of the competitors, and they were all just as chatty as ever, because they're kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a clubby group or whatever. And they do share stuff. It's just interesting. But also, you do need to remember this is a conversation. A lot of people have this impression, I'm going to go to the trade show, I'm going to suck it out of them. Guess what? They can tell you're doing that. And you will not be very popular. People can smell you. You know what I mean? You need to be friendly and open and flexible, and be ready for surprises that happen. You find out about social events you had no idea were going to happen. You bump into someone at a coffee shop that hadn't registered that you've known for years. Or you bump into someone from Gartner or Forrester, and you're in the IT world, SaaS world, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't even know this person was going to be here, because you don't always know who's going to be there. Some conferences let you know who's going to be there ahead of time, or they just, as you're entering, give you the list, or they don't. They vary. They're all over the board. But back to the hocus pocus focus. That is such a key thing in terms of the planning. And the fact that most of the time when I go, I don't have 3 days. I just have 2 days. And so I need to hit the ground running and really be focused. And I think the other thing I'd like to share with those who are more introverted is, if you read this book and recognize that if you plan the event as thoroughly as Jonathan probably has, about 8 articles on planning at least, you can be pretty comfortable actually going. You'll find out it can be fun. And you can also find out that you're very effective at this, because it's often the introverts who are more watchful and observant visually, and also good listeners. And so you can actually be very effective at these conferences, and it can be a way for you to grow, and I'd like to see more of that personally. And maybe I should go into friendlies now. What do you think, Jonathan?
Why not?
All right, let's go into friendlies. I mean, Jonathan goes into friendlies. He even qualifies what a friendly, or the different types of friendlies that there are. Those who might help you in your career, what you're trying to find out. different types of friendlies. Some of the friendlies you're going to see just this one time. You'll never see them again. Some friendlies show up that you never even knew, and they make your show, So I'll tell my first story because it is pretty funny. And this one was the NeoCon, the commercial furniture conference that happens at in Chicago at the Merchandise Mart. And it was my first time working for this particular customer. And I only found out that I definitely had the business 1 week beforehand. The NeoCon is very attended, shall we say. Thousands of people go. It's not as bad as Las Vegas, but considering where it is, it's bad. So I have to stay in a place about an hour away because there's no room and anywhere nearby. So I'm already kind of stressed out thinking, oh God, I got to get up at 5 a.m. just to get there in time. So anyway, I get there and I realize, oh, I'm losing my voice. This is really bad timing. And it's really crowded. It's so crowded that you don't want to take the elevator up to the 6th or 7th floor. You walk the steps. I'm losing my voice. Say no more. I walk the steps. And I get up there and I think, okay, I've only got so much voice. I got to go for the key competitor here. I got to start at the top. Normally I don't do that, but I have voice still and I feel like it's slipping. So I go up and find them. It wasn't hard to find them at all. They have a huge presence in this area. So I go in and they have a little booth in the front of the exhibitor area because you can't see their exhibit until they let you in. And so I walk up and I ask, oh, hi, I'm Ellen Naylor, and I'm here to see what you have to offer. I read about you and, a few little things like that. And the woman goes, do you have an appointment? I'm like, well, no, you have to have an appointment in order to come into our exhibit area. And I'm thinking, oh, great. I have been hired to specifically get answers to the questions from my client about this person, this group. That's the number one thing they want. And I can't even get in. So this is one of those instances of you're sitting here thinking, I was so prepared, except I didn't know about this little hiccup. So I went around the corner because the place is huge and to where they could no longer see me, but I could see who was going to come to their exhibit area. And I waited until a big name came in. At that time, it was Sun Microsystems. So this does date this back a little ways. And there were four guys from Sun Microsystems. And I asked, gee, I didn't make an appointment. Can I join you all? Oh, sure, no problem. So we go around the corner and, they're very happily received by the same woman who didn't let me come in. So I didn't have an appointment, but now all of a sudden I'm probably with her key customer. So I am welcome with open arms. I can ask about whatever I want. They have questions I wouldn't even know to ask because this is their space. This is the first time I'm at the Neo. Oh my God, it was so successful. I cannot tell you. But it's just an example of, you just have to be prepared for what's going to happen. Because every trade show I've been to, the story isn't always as good. There always are things that happen that are unexpected. And I can tell the second one. Do we have time for the second one?
Sure.
Okay. The second one was pretty funny too. It was also the NeoCon. It was the next year. So I was feeling like, okay, I kind of know this space a little better. And, I've actually been to one before. I kind of know how the game gets played. And part of how the game gets played is there are the booths and exhibit areas that everybody can go to. And the competitors can only go to each other's booths at 4:00. But then from 4:00 on, so, everybody's fair game, right? But then there's another area that was across the street where no competitors are allowed. And there's a bouncer, in fact. You feel like you're going into a bar instead of an exhibitor booth, right? And so I go in there and I get on the elevator and I go across the street. And once again, it's the main target. And so I get in and I just realized, geez, what's going on here? Nobody's paying any attention to me or anybody else that would sort of like to be collecting here, having a conversation. And so I just asked somebody, what's going on here? And one of the customers of this client says, oh, they're getting ready for their big party tonight. And I'm like, well, I'm not invited to that anyway, so I don't really care about that. Oh, you don't have to be invited to that, just come. So I went and they were serving lots of cool beverages and I was really hot. This NeoCon the temperature was hot. So I had a couple beers and I am a lightweight, but they were so nice and cool and refreshing. And I also noticed that most of the people there were way ahead of me in terms of the drinking of alcohol. So I really thought, maybe this isn't a good time for me to be collecting anyway. Speaking of ethics and loose lips sink ships, we'll just have a good time tonight, but let's not get too carried away with it. So I go back with not much collection having happened. And I think, well, I was hired to get intelligence. So I go back the next morning, and there are about 6 people there, and they're all a little on the hungover side, very quiet, looking pale. I am not hungover. So anyway, they were very glad to see me because their attention span was short, and I just helped them pass the time. And it was one of those where, Eric Littman was saying, you can have relationships that you develop that go on after the conference. This was one of those. They were so grateful to me. And, another point that you mentioned in the book too, Jonathan, and this is such a good thing to keep in mind in the point of empathy, is a lot of these people that are at the conference that are manning the booths, they don't really want to be there. So if you go up and talk to them, especially when they're hungover, they're really grateful. And towards the end of the conference in particular, down at the exhibitor area, they want to get out of there for sure. But, they got 2 hours left. It's a great time to go have a conversation again and just be friendly. And anyway, that's my story about friendlies. Everywhere I go, I collect friendlies. And I never thought of that term, though, Jonathan. So.
Yeah, and Ellen, okay, first of all, A, great stories, and B, thank you for tying it in with the book. I mean, that's great. And I got to tell you that the friendlies concept as part of planning is critical. And it's not just because identifying who you know and who can help you and who cares. It's also about, well, I'll tell you the story. A South African mining company going to Indaba. I'm asked to give a speech about trade show intelligence to the group, to the senior managers, about 60 VPs and above. And my buddy brings me in and I say, he says to me, look, I got to warn you in advance. Times are tough. Not many of these people are going to go to the show, so it's not going to resonate with them. So Ellen, I did the friendlies piece. I said, how many of you are going to be at the event? And of the 70 managers in the room, 55 were going to go. You should have seen the look on my friend's face. So I went, okay, that means if you had coordinated, right? Think about what you could accomplish. But I said, worse than that, I know you guys. When you see each other at the trade show, you're going to cling to each other like you haven't seen each other for years, talk office politics and gossip, and you're not going to get a darn bit of stuff done. And they all laughed. They said, you got us. And I did the same thing in Newfoundland with Ocean Technology. They're going to a show in the UK. And when I was a coach, soccer coach of 5 and 6 year olds, I called it the wet blanket test. And the blanket test was, if I threw a blanket out on the field, how many of my players would I trap up in it? And that's because they all traveled as a little group going back and forth. I said that, and the Newfoundland gang said, yeah, that's exactly what we do. We're going to the same workshops together. We're going to the same. So at a minimum, I said, and Jim, this ties in with you said, when you're planning, it's not just about who can help me and who cares. It's also about making sure that if I'm going to meet with them and I want to meet with my friends, that it's done in a way that doesn't take away from my effectiveness at that event. Number two, if my friend is going to an event, I can help them. If I'm going to go to a booth that has information relevant to them, for God's sake, why can you not ask the question for them? Or if you're at a keynote speech, why not ask the question? It's not taking me any more time. It's not taking them any more time. So that's the friendly and the concept of the planning. But there's a second thing, Jim, that came to mind when you were talking. And I'm going to go back to 2000, and you thought it was 6 or 7 when I was at the SLA conference in Vancouver. I got to tell you guys, I walked away from SLA impressed as hell and going, oh my God, does this group have a contribution to make, not to event intelligence only, but to intelligence? And I'm going to tell you 2 stories from it. One was an information specialist for a large organization, and her comment will resonate with me. She said, one of the VPs asked her for some information, and she said, why don't you team up with 3 other VPs? He says, we have nothing in common. And she said, yes, you do, because you've all made the same request. So the information specialist really does have line of sight, as to what the topics are and what's considered important. So I went, manna from heaven. Number two, I then attended a session called the reference interview. And I went, that's the intelligence interview. You are really good at helping people define what the true needs are. And the third one that impressed the crap out of me, and Ellen, this kind of goes to friendlies, is there was a speech made at the Vancouver conference about emerging new librarian information specialist discussion groups. And the line was, we're putting questions into it and getting answers from so many people. In other words, the company says this is the information you need. Again, before you burn your time at the event, why not go to the information specialist and say, A, do we already have it? Or B, can you get it? It's a lot more effective way of getting it, which also ties back into the proactivity of the book, which is to say, hey, I can help you before you go to the event. Let me take a look at what you plan to do. It also ties into, I'll look at it as an information specialist, all events around the conference trade show, and I should be able to identify based on the requests that I've got and the people that I know in the organization, what you should be focusing on, what's most important. Last thing I want to add about that, and this builds on Ellen, what both you and Jim said, the concept of friendlies, and Ellen loves that for a whole bunch of reasons, isn't just the book theory, it's actually the book development. You're going to see a lot of chapters that were co-authored by CI professionals and information specialists whose names you're going to recognize. And then you're going to see a lot of quotes in the book, lessons I have learned from trade show management specialists, and I could go through a long list of that, from CI specialists, from foresight specialists, from information specialists. This is a book that combines not just my quarter of a century learning, it's also, back to friendlies, things people have taught me, which are really, really critical. Last thing, since the virtual trade shows were brought up, I've had two sets of questions asked around the book. One has been about, are trade shows dead because of COVID? And the answer is nope. In fact, my friends are going back in droves right now that they can do it. The second question is, well, then I guess virtual trade shows are over. And the answer is nope, because organizations have seen the value in that. And so even associations are saying, let's do a couple of these virtuals and have the one national, international conference. So the skill sets in the book, and there is a chapter on virtual trade shows, and there's other material I can get you on virtual trade shows, really is appropriate for today's environment, yesterday's environment, and hopefully tomorrow's environment as well.
No, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. Business travel may be down, and for a number of reasons, actually, people and one is just the cost. You know, they're not spending as much, but it's costs more to travel now. Hotel prices are up, airline prices are up. The time that it takes is going to be going up. So the virtual piece is here to stay for sure. You know, and I think that just wanted to go back briefly to your point on planning. It actually combines a couple of pieces that Ellen mentioned as well, is that she only has 2 days at a trade show, right? So if she's there and she's done all the planning in the world, she runs into a hiccup like this, but let's say it's some piece of information that they've just released, and you have someone back at your company that may be an information professional that can actually help provide more background information that's been put out. So they did a big product launch, they put a whole bunch of materials out with it. All those materials aren't there at the show, but they may be on the company's website. So someone back can actually get that to Ellen or whoever's at the trade show for you or event and say, well, can you get more information about this? Or, you know, so getting that information, because getting the person that's the information professional is going to probably be able to get it faster, a lot faster, and with great benefit to your company than you or who doesn't have the resources at their fingertips and or the skills to get that information as quickly. So I think that, you know, in looking at this book, and I actually look at my own experience, which of course is mostly in the political world, but I mean, I did a lot of work on sort of intelligence in politics, and right at the moment I'm still shaking my head at George DeSantis and how he could actually get elected in the United States of America. But anyhow, for all the fabrications, but at the same point in time, I think the key things for this is in doing that intelligence is, number one, you have to know who other people know too. So know who the networks are, know who you count on for information, advice, who you can help as well, right? Like as Jonathan mentioned, if you're going to a show and you plan it out properly so that not everybody's at one event and you miss 3 other sessions because you all had to go to this one, plan it out, make sure that they all go to different ones, but then you ask, person B, well, while you're there at the session, I'd like to know this. And he may ask you, or he or she may ask you the same thing. I need to know something from the session you're going to. And even if you don't work for the same company, but you're within the same sort of space, and I know that actually has implications internationally. So if you're, one of the examples that Jonathan had in the book is this person they were both from the same company. They're at an international trade show, and they were, part of Team USA or Team Canada versus the rest of the world, and because of the global competition, and so that's also important as well. And I think the other key rule that I've always focused on in sort of doing stuff like this at different events is also know what you don't know. So it's super key important. Like, you don't know everything, but if you can actually make those connections and figure the networks out to find out who knows what, and that's super helpful as well. So you can plan so far, and that's the key, but there are certain things that you might not have planned for, but you have to realize, hey, wait a minute, I didn't figure that into it, and you can react and adapt to that really quickly, I think is very important. And I think one of the key things with this book is that the underlying tone of it is that when you're doing that, and the value piece of it is the ethics of it beyond anything else, because politics is a really sketchy world, and it's full of all sorts of interesting people, and some may not be the most ethical, and most people actually see politicians as that as well. But I think you have to remember your own values and how you're going about getting information, and how you're going to approach it, keeping those top line ethical values are the most important thing. And I think that everything has to be approached from that direction.
And Jim, I'm going to add to that, like, there's things I've learned from being at political conventions that I've dragged into the other world. And Jim and I have been at enough liberal and conservative policy sessions, electoral sessions, and we always see organizations hosting receptions where they invite a bunch of members of parliament and candidates in. It's a nice meet and greet opportunity. And so one of those organizations, I said, why are you inviting those people? What's your objective? And then I went, and how are you organized for that? Like, does everybody from your organization at the party know to ask these questions to these people? And do you guys get together during the party to compare notes and put in new assignments? Because I saw such a wasted opportunity where all the organization was doing when they had these incredibly powerful, knowledgeable politicians was trying to tell them how wonderful their organization was. But they actually need the politicians' help in putting forward their events. And so I poured that over to trade show intelligence, and I said, gang, if you're hosting a reception, well, plan. Make sure you have the right people to talk to the folks that are coming to the reception. And I have one chapter on, and if you happen to be inviting a bunch of people back to your facility, so if the event is in your city and they're coming into your plant, your workshop, holy crap, what a collection opportunity if you're organized properly for it. Alan, can I go to you, because I know that Jim's got some questions in here.
I'd like to just make a comment to follow up on what you all have been talking about at the far end. The far end being okay, you've collected all this stuff. What do you do with it? How do you disseminate it? And I think that's a great area for info pros in the company to help out. The networks most info pros have are terrific, are huge, and they have a really good idea of who would like and appreciate this information and in what format. And that is something a lot of people that do CI aren't quite so good at, you know. And so having somebody who is organized and knows how to communicate and with whom to communicate and how is very useful. So I just wanted to share that as well, because we've been talking about planning, but so often, and I noticed this in my experience as well, we're all so excited about the planning and the execution, and then what do we do when we get home? Or when we get back? What do we do with this information? It's got to be, some of it hopefully actionable. Some of it isn't, though. Some of it is just confirming what you thought you already knew, or not. And that's okay too.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I mean, I think from an info pro standpoint, that's a key piece, because the knowledge management piece is so important to organize. Because, you know, someone comes home from a conference and they have a stack of brochures and there's no context to any of it, or who would like this information. Because if you plan it out the front way as to who's looking for the information, you better make sure that in the back end that they get that information.
Yeah.
But then there's also other people that could also share that you know, information as well. So I think that that's the key piece, that you have to be organized, because otherwise it's just one big info dump and it's of value to nobody. So I think that it's important to do that knowledge management piece in the back end to coordinate and organize it, and that could actually also lead to, you know, other questions that for follow-up as well. So that's important.
And Jim, what I like about what Ellen has said is that we know CI is more than just planning and collecting. Forget about when you say communicating, Jim, at the end of it. It's that the book talks about ongoing briefings from the floor to people in the organization, so that you might have enough and they go, I really need you to investigate this topic. Now that I see what you're seeing, you have a chance to adjust your plan. And we always tell people these plans are living documents, they can change. So if you don't communicate it from the floor on a daily basis, if you don't have a newsletter that's going to people in the organization, well, how do you pivot when you need to pivot? Take advantage of it, which also means don't wait till you get home to analyze it, to assess it. Ongoing daily assessment of what you got. What is it telling you? What Ellen said, things happen. I have an ongoing kit at trade shows called What's the Buzz?
Yeah, I like that.
So we need people who are going, hey, they're talking about a lot of stuff. Just because it's not in my plan doesn't mean I'm going to ignore it. The team gets together, management gets together during the event and says, what do you think? Here's the buzz. Is this something you want me to investigate? So don't treat these events as I got a plan, I execute the plan, I go home, I give the data in there. I have a plan. It changes. My plans have always changed on site. I love when they change. I'm collecting, I'm analyzing, and I'm communicating. And by the way, even on the assessment, one of my favorite trade shows was FoodX, where we were in Japan, and I organized every 2 nights a big dinner at a Japanese restaurant in Tokyo. Now, the conference area was 60-minute train ride from downtown Tokyo. So we had 60 minutes in the subway and dinner time to talk about what we found today and what it looks like it's saying. So remember, you can even be creative in saying, hey, let's set up a way so that we can talk about what we're seeing around the intelligence plan and make it happen. So there's a lot of fun stuff that you can do with this. Jim, we're getting to the top of the hour. Are there any questions that?
I sorry, apologies. One thing is, in the chat box, I've put in a link where you can download the book for free. So it's in the chat box. I've put in there a link where you can actually download the book. And
You see the question also?
What's that?
There's a question in there also.
Yeah, I'm just getting to that. 1 second, sorry. One of the questions we had was about, do we have any recommendations or best practices for contracting with consultants to obtain event intelligence?
Ellen, that's you.
Ellen, that's you. That's what I have to say.
Well, that's you too, Jonathan. I think you do it more than I do. I think the ethical thing is really important. And it's useful if the consultant knows something about your business, if it's complex. But like in the case of, well, like the neocon, for example, it's commercial furniture. It's complex enough, but you can take it in pretty well. But I think the ethics is really important. Having them work with you. How do you want them to work with you? Who in your organization, or what individuals in your organization should they work with ahead of time across different functions to get as smart as they can? Are they going to work with some of your personnel during the conference, like Jonathan was saying with the Japanese? And I know in my case, one time we were just like, where can we meet? And this is really unkosher, but we did it anyway. We said, let's go to someone's hotel room because nobody can hear us. And that is a key thing you have to really be careful of, is people overhearing things you didn't mean for them to hear. Or, in our case, I usually hear people talking about things that they shouldn't be talking about in public. So I think the ethics, how you want to use the consultant, what your expectations are they going to train your personnel? What's the role you want that consultant to have? Is it training your personnel? Is it actually going there? Is it being behind the scenes? Is it training your people to participate through social media, like the Twitter stream? I know I've done that even when I'm not at conferences, when I hear something interesting. There's so many different ways you can use a consultant, but you need to make sure that ethics is really pretty top in front.
Yeah, and why that's so important, Alan, I'm glad you brought it with consultants, is that, and I'm going to say the ethics codes that you're going to use, it's not just consultants, it's also your own employees. Nobody in industry or government can distinguish between my consultant did something unethical versus you did something unethical, versus you saying, oh, my employee in production did something unethical. No, it all comes back to your organization. And given the emphasis on friendlies, once you get a reputation for doing something shady, it carries forever. You're going to have a rough time. That's number one. Number two, and this is not meant to be a plug of Aurora, but I'm so grateful that they're putting this on and Liz is there. They've done a whole bunch of TSI event projects. I'd be going to people that you trust from Aurora and saying, what have you seen? What are the best practices? What do we need to think about? And the same goes to Ellen and I, that we're in that role. Third thing, and I'm going to leave it at that, is when I go deal with an organization on TSI, it's a 3-year project. Okay, 3 years. The first year, I'm training them up and bringing them to the show. And so my government and other governments have been nice enough to give me 15, 20 companies going to events, provide a bit of support. But the idea is for them to see what they can do once they know about this. And once they see what they can do, they communicate that back to headquarters, get the budget to do it right. And that means year 2, they get to invite in consultants, but now they know what they need the consultants for. If you haven't done this before, and that's where I hope the book will help you, you don't know what really should be done by someone outside your organization and what really should be done by you. If it's highly technical and you don't have the technical staff, for God's sake, hire the right person to ask those questions and do that assessment. And then finally, in year 3, you've now seen what a consultant can do. You've now seen what you can do in a partnership, and now you're ready to go what I call big time in your program, where it's not just the annual trade show, it's the regional ones, it's linking things together. It's actually going to an event and saying, I'm not going to collect a darn thing, I'm making 10 new friends, tying it in with your overall intelligence program. And on that one, Liz is about to shut us down. I can tell.
When you see me, you know. Yep.
We're in trouble now.
Well, yes, we are right at the top of the hour. So just want to be respectful to everybody that joined us. We had quite the turnout for the first webinar of the year. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time. Jonathan, Ellen, Jim, thank you so much. There's been so many great insights. I have focus, preparation, empathy. I've got so many different notes. And I'm sure everybody listening too is really, really appreciative of your time and your insights. So if you attended, you'll be put in a hat. We'll select a name. You'll get a notification from us if you get some extra money to spend. And if not, then just stay in touch with us. We'd love to to stay close, and you'll find out when our next learning opportunity is, and any other announcements that we have as an organization. So I think with that, we'll close. Any final remarks, guys? And otherwise,
Don't forget to download the book.
yeah.
Yes.
My comment, Liz, is that there's a bunch of questions now coming in. Email us. We're very happy to answer them. Number two, thank you to all those people who have put in such kind words about the Three Musketeers and the show they just put on. Ellen?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for your questions, and do send them. I see there's virtual trade shows, etc. We can follow up on that. This is a good group. Yeah, the Three Musketeers will do it.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, thank you guys. I'll put their email addresses also in the follow-up email, so you'll have access to those as well. So, all right.
And also, thank
yeah.
you, Aurora, for sponsoring.
Oh.
Sorry, I gotta put a plug in for Aurora. You're always very generous, have been for years, sponsoring events like this to share.
Yep.
So thank you.
Always pushing forward. Good. Well, we'll see you soon. We'll learn something again, and yeah, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.